Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the second installment of Tech Talk, a collaboration between Sage and Tazergy. Just as TED Talk spreads ideas in the form of short, powerful talks, the goal of Tech Talk is to have short, powerful talks about all things technology specific to senior living environments. But before we dive in, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Larry Schneider. In addition to being a Sage board member, I'm a partner and senior living planner with Plunkett Research Architects. But the real brains behind this endeavor is Matt Haywood. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. Matt, you're muted.
Well, you know what? I think that my phone fell and then it muted. That was fine. Technology playing a role there. So in addition to being a husband and father to two great children, I'm also the owner and founder of Tazergy. We are a solution-oriented team or focused team with a passion and background in serving the senior living industry, from owners to operators to developers and design teams.
All right, thanks, Matt. Sage is thrilled to partner with Tazergy on this, to what we hope will be a long-term ongoing series. And if you're not familiar with Sage, we are a nonprofit membership-based organization. Our multidisciplinary members include really any great minds who's committed to excellence in and continued improvement of built environments for seniors. Our members enjoy educational opportunities such as this one, networking opportunities, collaboration, conference discounts, and much, much more. You can learn more about us at sagefederation.org. And Matt, anything further you want to expand on Tazergy?
Well, for us, we consider ourselves an extension of the people that we work for. So we're an extension of other people's teams. So we're built to serve, and I just want to make sure that people know that that's the heart of what we do.
All right, terrific. Thank you. So on Tech Talk, we'll walk you through a new or renovation project's tech journey from the initial idea to the grand opening. We may take some detours along the way and do deeper dives into specific components and concepts that you tell us you want to learn about. So let's get ready for what we hope will be an enlightening and engaging journey.
I'm ready.
Yeah, all sessions recordings will be available on the Sage website. So if you miss a session and want to revisit, you will be able to view it online. So Matt, in last month's inaugural Tech Talk, we got into things talking about the overview of the industry in general. This month, we're diving into strategy. We'll break down the anatomy of a good strategy, particularly as it relates to technology and senior living environments. And if you have questions along the way, just click on the Q&A button in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and we'll be sure to get those at the end of this session. We'll do our best to keep this to about 30 minutes or less, so don't wait to get those questions in. Enough about this. Let's start this thing off, Matt. How about that?
Giddy up. Let's do it, Larry.
Okay. So, we're in it now. We've got this. We've got a project, or maybe we don't. But where can we start? Where do we start with this strategy for IT?
You at least might not have a live project yet, but we're working towards it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say first it depends on the type of project, Larry. So I know that some members of our audience here might be focused on new construction, but it also depends on whether we're talking about a renovation or expansion project. So the first step can be summarized really as information gathering, right? Like that's really where it starts on the technology journey, right? So for an existing facility or community, we need to gather what exists out there, what's in place. We need to document those systems. If nothing exists, like if there's no documentation, if parts and pieces are unknown, this is the role that we're doing in any of the renovation expansion projects that we are participating in. Basically, we would perform that site survey, we would generate an observation report. And then we would assess what's needed. So for new projects, we need to know what our starting point is. You know, we talked about like we hope to have a project, right? And so we need to go through the various systems and take into account what it is that they want. What systems or partners does an owner, operator, developer already have in place that they trust and that they want for future projects? Which ones do they want to explore? Are we starting from scratch, or are there some predefined strategies that organizationally they have already defined, and we need to build from those and cover some of these other systems? What systems or unsolved challenges exist that need to be solved? That's what we want to know. We need to know what we need to plan for and address in this project. You know, so what you're seeing on your screen here is not an exhaustive list, but it's a fairly comprehensive list of the various systems that we are talking through in the questionnaire. Just understanding what the appetite is in each of these. What's the desire for it, you know, to make sure that, again, we're envisioning this as if the community, the project facility is open and operating. We want to understand what they expect from it.
Yeah, so that's a lot of information gathering going on, Matt, as you look at that list and you develop questionnaires for those individuals. You know, the questionnaires may be going out to a different group than maybe the group that's at the table too, potentially. I mean, who do we want at the table during this strategy session?
Well, it's a great question, Larry. And I would say that more is better here. Like if we just have a conversation between the technology consultant and the architect, and the operator isn't at the table or the developer isn't at the table, we're going to have some conversations and we're going to ask some questions that really truly can only be answered by some of those folks, right? So that's why I say when we're starting at the beginning of a project and we're trying to gather and define what the strategy is, there's some key people that really need to be involved in that strategic conversation at the beginning. So when we say the design team, obviously the architect is there, your technology consultant. We would include other design team consultants as needed, depending upon the type of project that we're talking about. So some of those folks would include interior design, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultants. Sometimes you need the civil engineer or your landscape architect. But generally at the strategy phase, we're talking a little bit higher level, and we don't want to put those folks to sleep. We really want to properly use the consultants when they're needed. One of I think the biggest challenges at this juncture, Larry, we find is getting operational buy-in and focus at this point of a new project. Just because of their perspective and their full-time job is operating, right? So to take a pause in their day and their schedule to participate in a visionary what they feel is not very important right now. It's important later. It's just not important right now. But I just have to say, like, our experience, and I think you might be able to back this up, their role is their perspective is crucial at this phase, this stage of the project, so that we can ask the questions, and that will allow our team to execute. We can then make more intelligent decisions based upon their operational input, feedback, goals at this point. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. You know, and you know, operations is one piece of this. The other piece is the marketing side, the residential side of things that, you know, yep. I'm sure the staff that are going to get involved in this process have their list of must-haves and like-to-haves just from talking to, you know, people in the industry or others that have launched different initiatives. it can feel overwhelming when you start looking at everything that is on this must have or like to have list. How do you create order out of chaos and create this cohesive vision moving forward?
Now, it's a very valid point, and we try to not get bogged down in details at this stage. You know, one of the other audience members at the table we talked about was a resident. You know, oftentimes, well, it depends on the project. Sometimes we will have a resident or residents represented at the design table, but that generally is not quite at the strategy phase. That might be after we're down the road a bit, but that is very much dependent upon the type of project. I would say that for your typical bread and butter assisted living memory care type project, there really isn't the opportunity to engage residents or prospective residents at the design phase, but on a campus type community where you have a different type of resident who's moving in, they might be buying in, they may have a better, more vested interest in helping shape the vision of what they want to see from the community that they're looking to move into, hopefully, and not have to move again. But you know, that segues to your question about how do we make that order out of the chaos, right? How do we take these things and start putting them together into something that is actionable, right? And that's the point of, that's what is running through our head when we're asking these questions. We are trying to measure, what is your goal from the space? If you notice, this word cloud here that we have, what you're not seeing is things like Wi-Fi, and you're not seeing things like, I need 1.1 gigawatts of electricity current running through the space. We don't need you to worry about, we don't need you to define those priorities. We need to understand, like Larry, you had talked about, how do you want to market and sell this? What's your positioning of this community? How are you going to, be engaging your residents? What is it that you expect to do from the space? How much IoT do you want within resident units? All of that, because that allows us to back into some of the systems. Is that helpful, making sense?
It does, and the formation of goals becomes so important. I mean, it needs to tie into the company's movement wherever they are, wherever that movement is, that journey, as you will. It's got to be in sync with that. The question is, how do you as you start forming these spaces, the one piece that it says flex spaces, that's the largest word, but it's an important piece, as we come out of a pandemic. The one site that I've had with a client of mine is, hey, before COVID, our fitness center was too small. We were thinking of expanding it, but now, post COVID, I've just kind of asked them to lean into technology, because you look at Peloton, you look at all of these apps that are out there that can help inform and create a more efficiency that maybe you don't have to expand space as you thought you may have. And certainly, there's everything from that type of a use to staffing softwares that are out there. I mean, I read in the Wall Street Journal this week that it's like 70% of software projects fail or face challenges in terms of being on time, on budget, with satisfactory outcomes. I mean, you've got to help. I'm assuming you're helping your clients work through, those types of challenges on any new software that's being rolled out, if there's something like that.
Yeah, I mean, just the topic of software, right? Like that's sort of the umbrella that gets laid on top of the space, the infrastructure that's there, right? Like typically we're not you know, your GC isn't necessarily buying out your medical record software and your marketing software, but they are buying out the structured cabling plan to get it there. But that's why we need to know what your vision is, what your goals are from the space, so that the physical plant, the systems that are installed, all lead towards your objectives and your goals for the space. So, you know, after you go through this, the prioritization, the formation of goals, you know, you talked about good, better, best. When you're going through systems and trying to figure out what you should do, we've got a budgeting exercise, right? After we've gone through this exercise of answering the questionnaire, going through and kind of building out the space a little bit, right? When you go through a new construction project, right? You're starting off with your schematics, your well, really you're starting with conceptual. Hey, does this kind of look like what we're doing? You move into your schematics, and then you move into design development. We're following a similar logic and process on the technology side. Is we're not diving into the nuts and bolts of the system. We're starting off making sure that what we're painting out here, hey, you want audio. Is it everywhere? Okay, well, that could cost, we need to tie a ballpark budget number with it. And once we sum up everything, you might look at the number, they might fall out of their chair, and then we go through a bit more of a refining. And that's where I'd say the good, better, best comes in. It's like, hey, what are the core areas that you need these things, right? There's the must-have, the like-to-have, you know, and maybe if I could, it would be amazing, your dream. That helps us give more strategy and more buying power, right, to a project, so that we can also reserve for possibly future expansion, right?
Sure.
If that helps.
Yes. And then there's going to be different goal sets by the developer versus the owner, right?
What?
That you're going to have to work through. So
no, that never happens. Those are always very in line.
Yeah, so we do have a few questions already. I'll just start diving. You know, one of them, as we look at the strategy processes, you know, can you give us a sense of how long the process takes, you know, on your side of things, and to get to some budgetary figures as well from start to finish?
Absolutely. I can give you a good, better, best. I can give you a range, right? If we've got a cohesive team that has clarity, they know what they want and they're about, and we've got good buy-in from the whole team, from ops to development and the design team, you know, we can be more aggressive, you know, but generally 3 weeks is a minimum time frame to schedule a time to run through the questionnaire. And we find it's better to have more of a conversation, collaboration throughout the questionnaire, instead of sending it over to people, asking for them to fill out the question, then send it back. Because there's some things, it's a conversation at that point, right? We can't put everything on paper in the form of a question. So, okay. and it can take up to 8 weeks. So hopefully that gives you a ballpark. One other thing to keep in mind, budgeting wise, our budgeting exercise is pre-GC. Like, we're not going to go out to the street. We're not going to go do a bid. We're going to assemble a ballpark budget. We want to assist the developers and operators and design teams that we're working for, to give them an order of magnitude of what would it take to achieve what we've laid out here.
So, and thanks for that, Matt. So as you look at, let's just say we're in a development project, and we're and there is an architectural design happening. Where do you feel you best fit into that process? At what point through that design process?
So we get calls all the time. Sometimes it's a shotgun wedding. Like, hey, you know, footings are going, or we're going vertical. We don't have anything, and we just realized it. The ideal entry point is is definitely at the early stages of the design development. And for the design teams that we have relationships for and work with, you know, sometimes it's just at the SD phase. You need to know as an architect, what are some of the walls and areas that you guys need, so that you guys can move forward with laying the space out with more logic and more intentionality. So that's what we try to equip the design teams in the SD phase. We understand you're really just working with a blank canvas at that point. Sure. So really priorities at that time is kind of size, space, stacking, rough-in, columns, not columns, but your shafts, if you will. And then sure. Also some rough ballpark budget.
Yeah, terrific. So another question talks about, strategy being difficult when a client or developer hasn't budgeted appropriately. How do we, so the specifics was, how do we best prioritize nurse call and audio needs? Those are, I'm sure, going to be driven by what type of features that call system is going to have, but you're trying to lay that foundation, and we're going to bring in a partner into the design mix to better inform that.
For sure. Sometimes our clients, they want to go through more of an evaluation process. They want to evaluate a few, say, e-call or nurse call providers, so we can help orchestrate that. Sometimes, pre-COVID, they were 100% in person. Post-COVID, it just depends. It depends on the size, scope, and duration of the project, and also the start time. It also depends upon quantity of projects. Like if an operator or developer is really looking for a standard that they can go forward with, that might lend itself to more of an intentional evaluation process. So we've definitely done that.
Okay. So another question, how can we know if the systems that we have are outdated?
That is
that they're using now are outdated.
Right.
Yeah. How do you approach that?
So I'm going to take that from two sides. One would be, an existing sort of, let's say, acquisition, an expansion renovation. There's that component. Like, hey, what systems exist there, and should we build on top of them? Right? Like that's a great question. So during our site visit, we're going to be evaluating, hey, is this still is it still under warranty? Is it end of life? Answering some of those questions first to understand whether, if you wanted to expand it, is it even a possibility? Is to start there. Next, we try to look into the crystal ball a little bit and talk about what we think is coming down the road, up the road in the future. If I look in the rearview mirror, there was the age-old question of like, hey, where do you put a wire jack? Do you really need Wi-Fi? Can we just get by with Wi-Fi just in the common areas? And I think where we're sitting today, I can tell you, we never have those conversations anymore. It's never a question by anybody at a new construction project phase when we're working on a design like, hey, I don't need Wi-Fi. Like, I really just want it in these small areas. So don't worry about it anywhere else. That certainly, that landscape has changed for sure as a result.
Sure. And when you made reference to the design development stage, you meant, after schematic design is complete, correct? There was a question
yes.
related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like during the SD phase, I would, just to be clear, we don't need to be under contract at the SD phase. But I think if we know we're getting under contract or our notice to proceed, we're released to start work in the design development phase. Absolutely. During the SD phase, we're providing as much as we can at that point to give you some starting points that when we're in the DD phase, we're like, why did you pick here?
Yeah,
Couldn't you have given us something that's stacked or whatever have you? Does that answer that
sure.
question, I hope?
I think so. Yeah. So, this question kind of goes towards budget again. And, when you're going through, your strategy and you're trying to develop prioritized areas and you're assigning values to certain things, I guess, are there early benchmarks that you might use for different types of projects of large scale? If you, is it a cost per square, or is it a percentage? Is it a cost per unit? Are there any tricks of the trade out there? That I know those are dangerous, but
there's a special handy technology calculator that you just can buy on Amazon, but it gets whited out and you just plug in whatever you want and it spits out a number. Problem
nice.
is that number is always 7 digits. There is I think it's a fair question, and I'll take it from this perspective. If we're sitting, as we're going through the questionnaire, we're talking with the developer and operator, and if there's not already a defined vision, if they don't seem to have total clarity, we definitely have some starting benchmarks, some recommendations for us to starting point. We don't sit there and say, well, listen, we'll cross our fingers and our hands, at the table and just wait for you silently. No, we're helping paint the picture that say, some operators like to do this, some do this, some might feel really strongly about water management. Others have no appetite for it at all or no preference, right? So we will help paint a picture around that. From the budgeting exercise, once we've gone through the questionnaire, we then dive into the project, and we're going to be doing some quantities to get so that we have a rough order of magnitude. When we say we're building an all memory care community, well, that's different than a multi-neighborhood community. And how do those plug in? Or it might be, hey, this is strictly an IL. And that's where we're starting, but then we're going to plan for, phase 2 and 3. Those are going to be another building or extension off of it. Like all of those play into the parts and pieces that we're putting in there. We try very hard to be as comprehensive as possible in our rough order of magnitude. We want to equip the customers that we're working with some range of numbers that give them some understanding of what it is that their vision strategy that we went through costs, right? Sure. That's really, so that, remember when we started, we were talking about, hey, at the project, it might not quite be a project yet. Well, that to me is a very important component. We've certainly started working with people to say, hey, I've got a budget, I've got it all dialed in. And when you hear the number, it just makes us ask questions. They might say, hey, my technology number is, 500,000. I'm like, well, is that all of division 27 and 28? Is that one component? Does that include your computers? Does that include your network infrastructure? We want to make sure that when we're looking at the whole thing, that the community can open up and it has what it needs, right? Because once the project's going, I think you were talking about software projects being over budget and sure. Beyond scope.
Right.
Well, the thing about a construction project that I've found is once you're vertical and once it's standing up and you need to get it, like, you're not going to tell an operator, oh, no, you don't need to secure that door, right? Like at that point, if it's a miss, it's a miss, and you got to get it done. So
yeah,
the change needs to be implemented.
Well, Matt, we're almost at our limit. I got a minute left, and I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to address this question. It's a question about a best go-to for staff preference. I'm assuming they're talking about like a software system for staff. I've talked to a provider recently that said this has really helped their staffing, that staff have some control to go in and schedule things, and they have certain rules that go to key people that approve it quickly, and if they want to pick up a shift or they can't work here or there. I don't know if you have anything to share on that, but.
Well, I can share my perspective and experience, and certainly what I hear and see. And I obviously staffing is a challenge, right? And enabling better communication there between people who want to pick up shifts and not. Some of it is gig work. Like, hey, is this a full-time employee, or are they just agency or whatever? I know that agency is a bit different than something like an Uber, if you will, for staffing. But what I think underlying all this for us, when we're talking about strategy, we want to be able to equip operators and developers in these communities to leverage technology to be more operationally efficient. And by doing that, I think that it frees up some funds and finance to look at how to staff better, right? Or how to operate better. But that's what is driving us is to talk about how that works, because that to me frees up so that resident care, the resident experience is elevated, right? The teams are able to execute better, and it's not such tight margins.
Sure.
And I know we're close on time.
We are. I know we've had this discussion. If we could have an open questions on the next Tech Talk, I think we've got some limitations on our technology, but we're going to continue to look at that because I think that's intriguing to open that up. Just a general comment on somebody saying technology scares most staff, and that's probably true. I mean, there's certainly a level of concern and adaptability, especially somebody that just might not be as tech savvy. So, I mean, those are the types of things that you're going to help as a team bring clarity to as we go through this strategy. And Matt, I do appreciate all the information that you gave us here.
Thank you.
I just want to wrap up by saying we look forward to the next learning more about how to integrate the systems in a community so that they can work and play together in the sandbox. So we talk about hardware, for example, or we talk about certain systems that don't talk to each other properly. That's what we're going to kind of dive into next time. In the coming days, we will send all the today's registrants a link to sign up for that session, along with the link of today's recording. In just a moment, you'll be prompted to complete a brief survey about today's session. We would really appreciate you completing that survey and sharing any particular topics that you'd like us to really dig into throughout this series. So on behalf of Sage and Tazergy, thank you once again for joining us.